a lot of us are doing the equivalent of sitting in our rooms playing video games when it comes to politics with the people that we know, looking at the screen, then the game that we understand, rather than venturing out into the real world where we're going to encounter things that are not in the video game, not in the matrix, not, outside of our political bubbles.
All right. I'm Laura Forcum, president of the Independence Center and a former marketing professor.
I'm Lauren Hall, professor of political science and author of the Substack, The Radical Moderate's Guide to Life.
This is We Made This Political, a podcast about making politics more about flourishing and less about power.
We talk about living together in families, communities, and as citizens, drawing from our backgrounds in psychology and political science, and as parents. We are absolutely thrilled today to have Kristi Kendall with us. She is just absolutely fantastic. We're going to hear a lot more about sort of the role of media and all sorts of topics relating to the media. And I'm particularly interested in sort of how the media can challenge or make worse polarization and the other challenges we're facing. But Laura's going to do a quick bio, and then we'll jump right in.
So welcome, Kristi. We're so excited to have you. For those of you who are not familiar with Kristi's work, she is the president of Kristi Kendall and Company, where she combines more than 25 years of journalism, media, and film experience to harness the power of storytelling. And she has produced nearly 100 pieces for ABC's 2020, and a lot of them focus on really complex policy and economic ideas and making those more accessible to a broad audience. She was the executive producer for John Stossel at Fox News and Fox Business. And she's also worked on a number of films. The one Lauren and I are familiar with is Undivide Us, which is really cool, and we're excited to talk about today. But she has many more under her belt. And we're just really excited to have a conversation with Kristi and all of you guys today. Yay. Thanks for having me. I'm so psyched to be here. Laura, I've loved you forever. And Lauren, it's so nice to meet you.
I can't believe you guys didn't know each other.
We're so thrilled to have you.
No, I know. Yeah. I've heard lots of great things from Ben and others. So this is great to meet you in person or person.
This is in person, right? Kind of.
It feels, yeah.
Feels kind of.
Well, awesome. Well, we'll jump right in. So one of the things I think both Laura and I talk about a lot is sort of the nature of complexity. And, humans aren't very good at handling complexity, but most social and political issues are deeply complex. And so there's always this tension in terms of how we communicate those. And so your work looks at sort of how film and television can help explain complicated and complex ideas. So I don't know if you want to give us just a little bit of background about how you got started in that line of work and sort of what led you to that path.
It's funny because people, a lot of people set out to be like filmmakers or journalists, and that really wasn't what set me off. I was always really interested in economics and political science. I was actually an econ poli-sci double major. And it was really that looking at kind of human behavior and how do systems work and how do we understand society. And John Stossel knew a mentor of mine, Marty Zupan. And he said, "Marty, I need an intern who understands economics." And Marty literally saw me at a seminar later that summer, like I think the next week, and was like, "Hey, you have enough credits to graduate early? I have a great idea for you. I think you should go to New York and do an internship with John Stossel." And I was like, "John who?" I wasn't really, and I actually think it's kind of a superpower for me in this field is because I'm not interested in personally being famous but I'm really interested in social change and like how do systems work and how can we try to cultivate
I mean, ultimately, like my why is around cultivating a better world for my kids and hopefully all of our kids to grow up into. And so since that really is what drives me, and I think a lot of filmmakers are interested in like making beautiful things that do good things for the world. But I really kind of come at it through like this other lens, I would say. It's just a little different.
Fabulous. So you didn't go to school to learn how to do the things you did or that you've done in your career. You like
No.
had on the job learning, right?
I
And
learned.
tell
I
us
learned
what that was like.
I learned through the school of hard knocks, is what I would say. I mean, and I think, I also was kind of this Midwestern girl moving to the big city, and I wasn't really a big partier or anything, and so I worked all the time, like in my 20s, I worked a lot and I was kind of curious. I was kind of a bookworm. So I read a lot. I worked a lot. And John Stossel is a really tough journalist. If you producers who've worked with him will say like how he really has high standards, but he's a really good teacher and a really kind, wonderful human being. And so I learned from him, and he's very, very good at what he does. So like it was a great experience.
Actually, I should probably take advantage of this opportunity to learn what a producer does because I always just kind of like gloss over that, like, oh yeah, producer. So please, it's probably everybody knows but me. So
No,
if
no,
you just humor
I
me.
just say it's like it's a really unsatisfying answer to that question because I honestly think the answer is it depends. Like it depends on what the format is. Like a movie producer for like a narrative movie has like their responsibility is to like get all the funding and get all the like people to the table and like do all of that stuff. But like a producer for ABC News 2020 is literally like they're kind of what you would imagine as like the writer. They are the primary journalist who is like figuring out the story, crafting the characters, they're working with the editor, but ultimately it all kind of answers up to the producer, which is more what then you would call a director's job for a documentary. So the fact that you are confused just shows that you have humility and like the willingness to ask a question, because my experience is nobody knows what a producer really does.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, anytime.
I've heard that as a joke in like certain circles about like sort of like, I mean, especially in Hollywood, sort of like producer could mean like anything from like you have a lot of money to
Yep.
you're actually doing like all this stuff. Yeah, but it sounds like you were a real producer. You're doing like actual production.
I like to think that at least. Yeah.
So, you mentioned sort of this combination of human nature and being interested in sort of how systems work. I mean, one of the things that I think is so important about storytelling is like and then this is particularly important in the current media landscape, like the way that we tell stories has really deep like moral and political impact and sometimes legal impact. So, I mean, how do you like think about how or like what's the process by which you think about like how to tell a particular story, or how do you think about the political implications of your work, like who's going to be seeing it, how they're going to be interpreting it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. It's something that we grappled with at 2020. I did a lot of kind of I would often do stories that were kind of like reporting on the way that the story was reported. You think about a story like I mean, actually something I was working on right at 9/11, where I was doing a whole piece on the media, and we were talking about how it had been the summer of the shark, right? Shark attacks were huge in the media that summer, but there actually wasn't an increase in shark attacks. Um, but there was there was a lack of anything else going on during the summer. And so if the media doesn't have something else to report on, they'll report on that. And I think it's a great example of how and it will drive fear, right? It will drive an emotional reaction in people. And it's very similar to the conflict entrepreneurship that we see happening right now in the current media landscape. It's I think media has this mythology that's built up. I'm sure you've heard, like, if it bleeds, it leads, right? This idea of like this most sensational thing. And I remember someone teaching me, as I was getting started, no one tunes in to watch a story about a plane safely landing. We tune in to watch the plane crash. And while I do think there's truth to that, I think that there's like a moral responsibility that journalists should feel that I think is lacking more and more and more now. Around giving their audience an accurate perception of what the actual, like, the full story is. Yes, there's a plane crash, but like that really almost never happens, and so it's probably not a totally rational fear for you to like be scared getting on an airplane. Um, and I think that kind of gets at something else that I think is really important for us to say in on these kinds of contexts, like when we're talking to people and around people, is like that I actually think that mythology of that it bleeds, it leads, and that it has to be the sensational story, and that's what Americans want. I think that is not true. Like, I mean, I do think that they do want that, but what I mean is that they also want stories of hope and inspiration and things that make you feel things and love and compassion towards your fellow human. Like, that is what I actually think we need more of a marketplace in. And I'm excited. So, what I'm trying to do in this kind of cynical media atmosphere is show actually other kinds of content can be hopeful. And if and you guys watched Undivide Us, like my whole thing is like, I don't want to leave people in a puddle of like sadness and despair at the end of watching a film that I do. I want them to feel like, yeah, this is a hard problem, but I actually have agency and I can do something about this. And so that's my kind of philosophy.
Mhm. Yeah. So I have like 85 thoughts, but I'll start with one.
Just do one at a time.
I'll just do one at a time. And then I'll hand it back to Laura, even though I'll have like five more. But so the term conflict entrepreneur I really love. And I think I first heard it. I don't know if Amanda Ripley coined it or if it's been around,
Amanda
but
Ripley. I should have credited her. Yeah.
no, yeah. So her book High Conflict is absolutely wonderful. We're hoping to have her on the podcast soon. But the sort of landscape, I mean, one thing Laura and I talk a lot about is the connection between politics and parenting. I mean, there's obviously this like, I think sometimes we think about the two things as really separate, but obviously like one of the things that Laura and I both think about a lot is how like we are raising children who are going to be participating in a political and social landscape, like how they what kinds of values we want them to have, what kinds of preparation we want them to have. And one of the really, really sort of sad things I've been struggling with. So I have three kids. Laura and I both have three kids who are about the same age. So like 12 on or 13 on to down to like 7. And the media landscape, certainly in the 90s and 2000s, right? I think there was an enormous amount of like, if it bleeds, it leads. And one of the things that bled at that time was abductions and violent crime and all of this kind of fear-based journalism that really affected the way that parents thought about parenting, broadly speaking.
Totally.
And so when I think about my kids and the opportunities they don't have, I mean, one thing, we have a 13-year-old who was home this summer for big chunks of time, and she couldn't find friends to play with because everybody was in like regimented day camps and regimented sports. And so she couldn't find buddies to just like bike into the village. We live in this like incredibly bucolic, super safe town. She couldn't find friends to go ride her bike to like get frozen yogurt and like walk along the canal. So I'm wondering if you have thoughts about like sort of the media's like broader responsibility or maybe just like I mean a more hopeful thought about like maybe the tides are turning. I mean, there's a lot of people like Jonathan Haidt and Lenore Skenazy and other folks who are trying to sort of help us understand the baseline, right? Like the baseline of abduction is really, really low. I think, but we have this really amplified fear.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I love Lenore's work on this. She's just absolutely the best. I'm glad that you mentioned her. So I've reported on this a lot. And I was reporting on it in the 2000s, right around actually when it was all happening. I we got a big award for it didn't seem to make any difference. I mean, this exactly what you're saying, like abductions, pulling all that footage and just being like, here's the media hype and here's the actual truth around abductions. They're incredibly rare, all of these things. And I think that what is wonderful about what's going on right now in terms of Lenore and in terms of what I see going on in the media story is it seems to be that there's a sense of reporting now on the loss that we're experiencing because of that hyper vigilance, of a generation who is scared to take risks or, and kind of the outcomes of that. And I actually think that media is trying to self-correct a little bit. I don't like to just beat up on the media, because they have a tough job and they're trying to get the stories out there. Um, but I think that the success of Lenore's and Jonathan's work is actually indicative of the pendulum swinging back. That's at least the hope in my heart for my own. I don't know. I was always the parent who just let my kids, walk around New York City by themselves. Not in an irresponsible way, but in a way that matched their risk tolerance, where I felt like they could be responsible and take risks. So I think there's more of that going on now.
That's interesting, Kristi, that was your point of view as a parent, because I feel like we've almost gotten to this stage of performative anxiety that has to do with what do I think about my parenting? What do I think other people are going to think about my parenting? And so I think your kids are college age, right?
I have one kid who's a sophomore in college and another who's a junior in high school.
Okay. All right. So your kids are a little older, but I remember this uproar. I can't remember who did this. Somebody wrote an essay about I'm letting my 8-year-old ride the subway in New York.
That's Lenore.
Was that Lenore? Okay,
yeah,
that was Lenore.
She was named the worst mother in New York. But that is also, her kids are in their mid-20s now. So that was also
was
quite a while ago.
10 years ago?
Yeah,
Give
yeah.
or take?
No, more like 15. I would say it's 15 pushing 20.
Okay.
Her kids are proper adults.
Okay. Proper adults. I like that. But
not that they're independent, right? I don't know.
yeah, they're late adolescent to adult. But I think this is really interesting. So I guess your kids would have been wandering around New York unsupervised after Lenore's essay. Is that right?
For sure. Yeah.
I mean, I have to say, so I live in a very small bucolic town, probably a lot like Lawrence. And when I'm letting my daughter and her friends walk around the square, which is a block from where I am right now, I have in my head the worst things that I've ever heard in the news about child abductions, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking is this okay with the other parent? What are people gonna say? Are they safe? Right? And it's just it's exhausting. And I'm trying to think what would I need, or what do other parents need content wise to be able to feel you know what, that I think we're really bad at understanding base rates. And you take one vivid example, right? And it just outweighs everything in your daily life. So
this is literally the media problem, right?
Right.
Because our lizard brains are tuned in to say, oh, I saw that there was this terrible thing that happened to that other child, and that could happen to my child, and I need to prevent that from happening, which I'm definitely a victim of too. Trust me, I actually am scared to swim in the ocean because of sharks, even though I've done reporting on how rare shark attacks are, right? That we have these irrational fears. So I actually think that the answer is I think we need to understand what are the risks of not letting your kids take a risk.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What are the risks of having our kids be an anxious, this anxious generation stuff? Having kids worry too much about what the consequences of not big things like, should I drink to excess? And I mean, this is
Hmm.
literally, I was talking to my son. I'm like, really, you should not drink to excess in college. This is not a great idea.
Um,
Um, but like, what are the consequences of other things? Like, should I put myself out there for a job? Should I, take this trip to a foreign country where, everything isn't planned out perfectly? Like, how can I take risks that are age appropriate and will help like fill out my life, and
Mhm.
so I I think it's not it's certainly not something we're going to answer today, but I think that one thing people could do at home is like try to be as self-aware. I mean, and this is with all of this, right? Whether it's political extremism or, the getting your kid kidnapped. How can I try to be a better consumer of the media that I'm eating so that I then can respond in ways that are going to make my life better, my community better, my family better, right? Like, isn't that's what we're going for here,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like a sort of like we need like a society wide like cognitive behavioral therapy session, like or like an ongoing one where we're
Hmm.
like, look, hey, your anxiety is real, right? Like, and it's it exists for a reason, right? Anxiety is supposed to help us, but here's all of the other things that you need to take into account, right? Let's practice. I mean, and I had to do similar things with Laura. Like when my kids first would, they'd go down to the playground down the like we can look at it from our back door. But,
Hmm.
when my daughter was 6 and she was going with her older sister, who's sometimes like not the best, like,
She's an older
caretaker.
sister. She's an older sister.
She's an older sister. I'd have to sort of talk myself through it. And I think
Yeah.
but you have to have that awareness to do that in the first place. And that's why I think that the stories you're pointing to, that I think I am hopeful about it too. I think the media is self-correcting. And I think, Hate's work and Lenore's work and all these other folks are helping to kind of do that, but it is like it's practice. It's a muscle that we've forgotten how to use, and I think we have to like learn how to use it again.
You guys should totally have Lenore on the podcast.
Mhm.
She's a rock star. She has a new TED Talk that's out. Actually, she emailed it to me the other day. She's just great. I love her.
We would love connections to get one.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, she'll totally do it. I'll connect you guys after this for sure.
Thank you. That would be awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder too, it seems like media has to do with where we are right now in terms of our risk tolerance.
Hmm.
And I feel like we've reached really low levels of tolerance for risk, especially compared to what life has been like over the
Mm,
past like 20 or 30 years. And, I feel like we have a very upside down relationship with risk where things that like we actually know pretty confidently, but we'd like to continue doing, we're going to keep
yeah.
doing, right? It's like, oh, well, sitting 8 hours a day at a desk, like we know
Right.
pretty confidently how that relates to health risks. Nobody's really exercised about that. Like
Right.
literally, but if
Right.
you're talking about things that are vivid and I just see how all of this stuff sort of adds up to parents being like, yeah, actually, I'd much rather you sit in your room on your computer than
Computer.
be out wandering around the streets when I think we have that totally backwards.
Well, and okay, I love that you just said that because yes, and that is exactly it's totally parallel to our political situation that we're
Okay.
in. Because we have this sense of sitting, I mean, the equivalent of like a lot of us are doing the equivalent of sitting in our rooms playing video games when it comes to politics with the people that we know, looking at the screen, then the game that we understand, rather than venturing out into the real world where we're going to encounter things that are not in the video game, not in the matrix, not, outside of our political bubbles. And that actually that is how life happens. Like that is, and it's not just that life happens it's the richness of life and the humanness and the interconnectivity and the joy, and that's not to say that like being in your own political bubble and learning and going deep about something isn't important, or sitting in your room and playing video games. Those are both things that can bring you a lot of joy. And I have my older kid is a total gamer, and he loves to do that. That's a way he can connect. But he also recognizes the importance of getting out into the world and making those human connections, and that is like that's part of the human experience. And I feel like from a political statement, it's actually like having that interconnectivity, and particularly connecting with people who are different than you, is actually essential to the fabric of civil society, So, like, if we want this whole thing to be successful, we kind of have to do that, folks,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm. That's so well said. I love that. That's a fantastic parallel. Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Like, I think a lot of the polarization that we're seeing, and by the way, there was a great New York Times article this morning about how, like, just talking about the American people are much less polarized than elite. So like, I like to sort of
Totally
keep in mind
true.
that, like, it's not as bad as like, if we just
Mhm.
look at our national political landscape, it's, a hellscape, but the
Right.
actual American people are doing much better than that.
Well, but then, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to interrupt, but like that's what we were talking about before too, about the media story, right? The story around like risk, right? Like, how risky is it for you? So, I've been doing, in my documentary, we did these conversations with people, and people would come. We tried to do conversations about like the hardest things that we could come up with, guns, immigration, the environment, abortion. Like, we weren't trying to like pick the easy things,
Mhm.
and people would come to the table, and these were kind of regular Americans, but we had asked them and they knew they were going to come and talk about this. They were completely freaked out. They were like, is this going to be more Povich? Are people going to be fighting? Like, are people going to be screaming at one another? And there was none of that, because that media story that we hear kind of up here is so disconnected from the way that
Mhm.
regular Americans who still care about stuff and might have differences on things. It's so different from how they actually act. And it's a perfect analogy to this risk thing and what you're talking
Mhm.
about this New York Times piece. It's like we all just need to have a little bite of reality sandwich,
Mhm.
and be like, hey, this feels really risky to have these conversations. In reality, like, most people are pretty okay with disagreeing
Mhm.
with one another, and that's good.
Yep.
Sorry, I totally interrupted you, but I got all excited about what you were saying about the New York Times piece.
No, and that is one of the things. I definitely want to get to, the some of your specific projects, including like Undivide Us and Raft. So maybe we're
Okay,
us in
yeah.
that direction. But I did, I think a lot of the sort of like deep polarization that we're seeing on the sort of elite level. I mean, I think like one of the assumptions that I often sort of feel is underneath a lot of this is like, well, if we just push hard enough, the other side will go away. And so,
Mhm.
what I want to
Mm.
like explain to my kids and have them understand is like, people with different views of the world are going to exist because that's what humanity is. Like, that's just how human social life works. So it's like, yeah, you can either closet yourself away and like just hang out with people who like, you can create a bubble, or
Yeah.
you can figure out, like, you can develop some tools. And one of the things I think is really hopeful is that there's like, Laura and I were talking to someone yesterday who hopefully we'll have on the podcast. Like, we're developing better toolkits for having hard conversations. Like, we're getting better at figuring out how to defang these kinds of things, like
Totally.
praise work. I mean, like, so there's a lot of people doing work in this space. So I'm really hopeful about that. But it is funny, like, there's just this like, well, if I just scream loud enough, like, those people will stop
Mhm.
existing in my
Right.
world. And it's like, that's not how it works. Like,
Right. But it also gets to something that I think that you're alluding to, is that we have to model this kind of stuff for our kids, though, because high schoolers are definitely freaked out about having these conversations. And so we've actually done with the movie, and I've done a lot of speaking with like teachers to try to help give them some tools that they can use for civil discourse. Because even some teachers, there is this perception that if you have a conversation where you have an opinion about something, that you can be canceled. That if somebody else disagrees with your opinion, that they can just take you down on social media. And that, I think that is something that we should push back against, like, with a lot of force and respect and love, and
Mhm.
just say, hey, this isn't how we encourage civil dialogue, because we have to be okay with disagreement and not like ruining someone's life, because they have a different opinion. So
Yeah, and the other thing I think, and we've kind of touched on this some in this podcast, like the skill set for interacting effectively with other people is actually not super complex. Like we evolved to do that. We have those abilities. And it's interesting, like, as we're talking about this sort of people are bad at base rates, right? And
mm,
like it reminds me that we've kind of created this false consensus of what people are like because of these really vivid examples. So I've talked before on this podcast that like the reporting about people being terrible in airports, right? Like so much bad behavior in airports and on airplanes. I never see that. And I see the opposite. I see
mhm,
people being incredibly kind and thoughtful to one another while traveling by air. Um,
yeah,
and so like I feel like we've kind of arrived at this place where we think that it's going to be incredibly difficult to interact successfully with other people and that you need this really deep skill set. And like I try to model with my kids, like actually curiosity will just get you a really long way, right? And in order to just be like, oh, really? That's interesting. Why do you think that? Right? Like that's this is not a long list. And
mhm,
and so I think a lot about like what does it take to have kids who are okay with the curiosity, who feel safe being curious.
yeah.
Um, right. So like that's kind of what I'm trying to cultivate in parenting. And Kristi, like I assume you must be a curious person. I feel like that's how you got into the work that you do. And so sort of
I
being like,
think
let me show
so.
this on film. Right. And
Yes.
and I'm wondering like is curiosity something that you feel like you engendered in your kids or like you training curiosity? What are you training?
Ah,
Are they gonna be producer type people too? Like, do their brains also work in this form of like, let me
yeah.
script a story?
So one of my kids is so my oldest is a musical theater kid, so he is into the performing work. My other kid is much more into the storytelling aspect of it, and thinking about how, and she's an actor also, but she's also interested in like, how do I design and help like cultivate stories that move people. And she's been really interested in the like issues around identity and the assumptions we make about other people. Like, so
Mhm.
I think so. I haven't thought of it as like something I was intentional about in terms of, I've been doing this work around kind of thinking about civil discourse and how do we elevate that and the importance of it, really more for like the past 3 or 4 years. It hasn't been the only thing I've, done piece of that. And I got really into it because I felt like, um, I I guess it was curiosity. I felt like there were all these questions about what I was seeing in the media versus what I was seeing in the interactions in my own life, and kind of trying to get at the base of like, well, why is that? What's going on there?
Mhm.
Which is pretty much how I get at every story. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Why is this happening? Why do I have this sense from the media stories that we are falling apart at the edges? And what I see in my own life is, and I have a pretty diverse, um, politically, like my social life is very diverse. My family is much more conservative, and I live in the Socialist Republic of Brooklyn. Like so like I naturally have like a lot, and I'm I have a libertarian world in New York. Like, so I kind of have all these different people, and I wasn't seeing the crazy high conflict. And so that was kind of what turned me on. So yeah, I guess it is. But I've never thought about it, Laura. Thank you.
So I would love to get into some of the specific projects. We've talked about Undivided before, actually, because we had Ben on the podcast.
I love Ben Kristi.
I know.
Oh my gosh, isn't he the best?
He is the best. Yeah, he just such a generous, kind, like super, just tons of integrity, and also just like
smart.
He's super
he's
smart.
Also literally read every book like on this
I know.
topic.
Well,
and he'll just be like, oh, well, like this person says, and he'll be like, oh, well, I'm not really that smart. I'm just quoting other people. I'm like, how does he get all that information in one brain? I don't even understand it. But
yeah, I had some serious like imposter syndrome. I think the last time I talked to him, where I was like surreptitiously taking notes. I'm like,
okay, you and me both, right?
I've never read that one, but okay. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about the movie Undivide Us, and then we want to hear about Raft. And but the movie Undivide Us is just, I think it's super powerful. I love it, and I've talked to lots of people who are actually doing like screenings of it, and it's like a really important part of this, opening people's eyes to the fact that like we can do this. Like, to get to Laura's point, that like we're actually not that bad at this. Like, we just need to have the space.
We're telling ourselves a story that we're bad at it.
Yeah. No, exactly. And that was kind of the insight that drove the whole film. Is I was like, we have this perception that we're scared. And if we are scared, the other piece of it is like the fear drives us to that place where we're the kid in the video game, right? Where then we're staying in our rooms and just playing our video games with each other, and the social consequences, though, of not venturing out and having conversations with people that are different than you are really bad, both for you and for the other person and for society as a whole. If you don't talk to people that are different than you, you will become more extreme in your viewpoints. Because there's this social science thing that happens where you become more extreme, and it's been studied over and over and over. You get a group of people who talk about something together, they will become more extreme about whatever it is, whether the unimportant things or important things. And so the other thing you will become much more of a jerk about how you feel about people on the other side. And that is really like, you will characterize them as more extreme than they actually are. And both of those phenomena are terrible. So like we have to stop that within ourselves. And the only way to do it is to step with courage and humility and curiosity into those social spaces. And so I wanted to create a movie that would show people doing that without getting, I was trying to show people doing without getting their heads, snapped off. I'm enough of a journalist where if the bad thing had happened, I would have included that with some sort of an explanation. But the fact of the matter is, it didn't happen. Like, and we actually didn't know exactly what was going to happen when we started this whole thing, because even though we understand the social science of it, right? And you're like, oh, I understand the social science, this shouldn't happen. You're still affected by that lizard brain, right? I'm affected by all the media stories I see, right? Like, it looks crazy out there. And I'm bringing people together to talk about guns where they really feel differently about, and it worked out really great. And there were legitimate friendships that came out of it. There's this one character, these two characters actually, Matt and Celicia, where they were really on different sides of the gun debate. But at the end of the film, we show them they had a legitimate friendship that developed out of this, and this isn't actually in the film, but they ended up inviting each other to each other's weddings, like things that are, we didn't know that till after the film had wrapped. But like, these are beautiful things
Mm-hmm.
that show that people really want to have these conversations. They want to have these friendships and these relationships with people that are not just like them. So anyway, watch Undivide Us. It's free on Civil. You can watch it. We just got some big award from the
I know, I was
Access
going to say
Foundation, which is
that.
very nice.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
The
we're very
Templeton
excited.
Award,
Yeah.
fantastic. And I know you got Film Festival awards. You were in film festivals.
Yeah,
I'm
we
so
had.
glad for the recognition for that movie.
It's been a total blessing. And so, the movie was funded by donors who, including the State Policy Network and including Stand Together, like a whole bunch of people got together. And it was funded by people who believed in this narrative and believed that this would help civil society. So I'm just psyched that like I've honored their investment, So that's been
Yeah.
good. And so we're always trying to get it out to as many people as possible. Um, so, wait, do you want to talk about Raft for America? Because that's like the craziest thing I'm involved in right now.
Yes.
Yes.
That's if you're like your whitewater rafting
My,
for depolarization, your money is where your mouth is.
no, okay. So this is this program. So these guys, these two guys at this organization called Team Democracy, that I have actually now joined the board of, they contacted me, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago about after they saw Undivide Us and they were like, we need this woman to be involved in our stuff. And I was like, okay, a lot of people reach out and a lot of people have interesting ideas. And this guy he grew from scratch one of the largest whitewater rafting companies in the country in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania. And he knows all the whitewater guys around the country. And he said, when people get in a boat and they paddle together, it changes something about how they view each other. And he said, and I want to take that and help inspire Americans that they can do this more in their lives. And that nugget of an idea, and it's, whitewater rafting is very visual, but you really are trapped on a white you're trapped in a very small place with 6 other people. And it provides this really interesting platform for people to have pretty intense conversations and then paddle, and so it's not unlike the film. I mean, people come into the experience, they've kind of taken a political survey, so we kind of know where they are politically before we put them in the boat. And then we put them in a boat, and we have a bunch of conversations. We're doing them this year. We're doing them more kind of focused around actual issues. So we did one on immigration about a month ago in Utah. It was people who felt really differently about the immigration issue, which is a tricky issue for a lot of people right now. And the the love and respect and kind of calls for like humanity that came out of that trip were amazing. It was awesome. We're just finishing a video on it right now. It's a lot of fun. We're doing one soon. I know you guys, I don't know if this will launch in time. So we're doing one in about a week about election integrity on the James River in Richmond, Virginia. So it is really cool. So anyway, I love what Raft is doing. And their theory of change isn't that it's kind of like Undivide Us, right? Like our theory of change for that movie wasn't that we were going to have conversations with all the people in America and help change the world that way. But that if we can model and show that this is possible and then amplify that, like then think about what that could do for the world. And so my challenge to everybody once they're on a raft trip is like, hey, you are now in this. We're all in this together. And like we all have a responsibility. I don't know. My mom always raised me with this thing where she would say, to those whom much has been given, much will be required. And I feel like I've been given like this ability to help tell stories. And so that's my job here, right? Like it's to try to tell stories to help make the world a better place. And so if each of us does the part that we can to help, whether it's a book club, whether it's at your local church, whether it's whatever it is, your soccer mom coffee clutch, I don't know, it's like we can each of us try to, make our communities better, our states better, and our country better.
Yeah. So one of the things I actually was just thinking, like rafting is such a powerful metaphor. I mean, one of the things that I find so frustrating about like the sort of like polarization, I talk a lot about like false binary choices in politics, right? So
Yes.
we, we're categorizing things as like pro-life or pro-choice or either pro-immigration or anti-immigration, right? Like, and like, so the problem with thinking about all those things that way is that we actually can't then find solutions, right? We can't come together to find like non-zero sum solutions where, and it's not just a matter of like choosing one perspective over the other. Like it's not an issue of like one side winning. In the same way that like when you're on a raft, like if you want to go one way and I want to go the other, like we have to figure this out.
Right.
Like, right. We're not gonna, or we're gonna flip. Like
No, and flipping is not something that we go for.
But it seems like, in so many like policy areas, we are flipping, right? We're not doing, like, we're actually harming people in really serious ways. Like I look at immigration, I look at criminal justice, I look at like all these ways that our polarization has prevented us from coming up with like common sense solutions that like a lot of Americans support that are nonpartisan. But because we like can't talk to each other and certainly our like leadership is not talking to each other. So I think it's just like a really powerful metaphor in general. I mean, like getting people into a raft is a genius way of like, you're stuck here, right? Like you can't walk out of the room, right? At least for that time. But it's also just a nice metaphor for like, we should be paddling in the same direction, or at least we should be coordinating our paddling in order to make things better. Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. We're doing some things where we've gotten some politicians in the boat. We've gotten some great politicians. We had Tom Tillis last year from North Carolina. He's retiring. I say unfortunately this year. But because I think he can't take it. And that is unfortunately, I think, what's happening with some of the particularly the good ones who are in there on both sides, who are just like, I can't right now. And that makes me sad. And what I mean, because people will say like, what do you do about this? Because it's so complex right now with executive power, growing the way it has, with Congress really kind of absconding a lot of their duties in terms of, representing folks and not just falling in line. So it's tricky, but I gotta say, I go back to kind of this is the greatest political experiment. I do believe in the American experiment. I believe this is the greatest political experiment known to man. And I think that each of us has we each have a little tiny bit of power, in that experiment to do what we can. And I think that the more of us who are having these conversations about stepping up and stepping forward, and exactly what you were just saying, Lauren, like, I'm not interested in just in getting my way on everything. I'm interested in like proactive, like good things moving forward in terms of policy, and whether that idea comes from someone who is painted red or painted blue or painted orange, I really don't care. You know what I mean? I'm interested in the outcomes. And I don't know, like more of that, less of the other stuff.
I mean, I feel like what you're doing in a lot of cases, Kristi, is sort of like using television and film to show that things are more complex than what people think they are. And I feel like, to me, that's one of the really beautiful things about interacting with other people, is that like other people are almost always not what you think. They're more complicated than you think.
And so it's interesting that like it seems like the opportunity right now and a lot of your work does this is to be like, hey, you're getting a message that this is very simple, but here's the complexity, right? Like you think that you can look at two people and guess who will have what view on like gun rights, for example, and like you can't. That's what you show in
Mhm.
Undivide Us, right? Like you can't. And their reasons for what they think are not what you might have guessed. And
Mhm.
I love talking to people and just sort of being like, wow, like, I wouldn't have expected that.
Yeah.
I feel like
Mm.
I'm really lucky to have so many people that I interact with that I'm kind of like, oh, really? Tell me more. Like, I wouldn't have expected that. And I love how
Totally.
your work does that. I was wondering if that's deliberate, or that's how you think about it, sort of like you are complexifying.
It's interesting because I think I try to both complexify, well, and simplify. Like,
Mhm.
interesting, like,
Mm.
because I would say that one of my I shouldn't say I have superpowers, but like one of the things that I'm good at as a
You do.
storyteller is to try to make it understandable to regular folks. And to not make like too many assumptions about what people are coming to the table with, other than the assumptions that are around kind of our common values, right? Like I tend to make those assumptions around um uh, that we all want a better life for our kids, that we all are, trying to
Mhm.
work hard. And, and, like there are some things that are really things we kind of stack hands on as Americans around our values and who we are. Um, but I've always tried to kind of simplify the story. Um, i- so maybe it's both, maybe it's yes and.
Mhm.
I mean, because I do think, yes, the stories are much more complex than the binary that we're being shown. But I do think it's important to not get too highfalutin about it, and
Yeah.
to like
Yeah.
just encourage people, because people will sometimes folks will ask me at screenings or something, like, what is like the I feel like they want like a prescription for like,
Mhm.
this is what I'm supposed to do. And I'm not a doctor that gives prescription advice. What I am is like a person who's in our society where we're all trying to do our best, who says, figure it out, whether it's what kind of action you can take to try
Mhm.
to heal some of what's going on in this lovely, crazy country of ours.
Mhm. I wanted to mention one of our viewers is Chip, who I met at the Mercatus Center Pluralism Summit
Oh, cool.
a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. But he's doing a really cool initiative. Well, anyway, I'll connect you with him offline. But I
Awesome.
think there's a lot of people like Chip, and Seth Kaplan is another person I'm thinking of, who actually
Amazing.
are coming at it from the perspective of like foreign, like their experiences in like peace building and
Hmm.
peacekeeping overseas. And then
Yeah.
they're bringing that back and translating it back into like, what can we do at home given what we're seeing? Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's just such a powerful, like, we actually have a lot of tools. We're not quite like, we haven't figured out quite how to use them here yet. And so Chip's work is amazing. Um, and we'll connect you. But
Awesome. Psyched. I'm psyched to meet. That's great. Yeah. And in terms of tools, I do think, this idea of that, I mean, that we didn't talk about this before, but in Undivided, we use like perspective swapping, which
Mhm.
I think is really valuable if you can do it with, um, like being really authentic about it. Because I've tried to do it with people where then they'll just take the perspective. Like if they disagree with something that I just said, they'll say, they'll kind of turn it into something where they'll say, well, here's why you're wrong. And that's not what perspective swapping is. But perspective swapping, saying, I see you. I think you must really care about people. You must really
Mhm.
care about this issue. You must really care about, where you actually try to embody the good parts of the person on the other side and see their humanity. Bob Talese talks about that the real danger of all this is that it could lead us to a place where we don't recognize that people on the other side of an issue deserve the benefits of citizenship that we have, and that's the real danger of where we could end up. And so the more that we can remember that even people who are completely misguided, on the other side of an issue,
Who disagree with us.
anybody who disagrees with me obviously has, some things to learn, right? I'm just joking. But regardless of how misguided they are, but that they still have the benefits they deserve and have a right to the benefits of citizenship that we all enjoy. And that's actually super important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Kristi, it sounds like from your work, you have a lot of things to be optimistic about. And we like to wrap up the podcast asking people, like, what are you optimistic or hopeful about this week right now? So we might need a whole other podcast for you to list your optimism, because that's one of the things I really respect and appreciate about you. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, let's just take it full circle. I am optimistic about our kids. And I know a lot of people are not optimistic about our kids. I am optimistic about our kids. When my kids saw Undivide Us, they didn't see it until the film premiered. They said, Mom, I really, and my kids are like New York City kids, they're not trying to be like my friend. They were like, Mom, they're great. They're great. But they weren't like, they weren't trying to suck up to me. But they were like, Mom, I want to screen that at my school. I think all my friends need to see that movie, because there's some other platforms that do debates, but they tend to do them in ways that try to cultivate, tension, that sexy, whatever.
Yep.
And my kids said to me, I want my friends to see that because I think it's actually really important. And I think that our kids recognize that we need this. And so you want to know what I'm optimistic about? Like, your kids, my kids, our kids are going to save us from ourselves.
I love that.
So, yeah. I'm optimistic about
you.
that too.
Yeah. 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 They're not what the media says they are, right? Like, to also come back to that theme.
They really aren't. They're a bunch of awesomeness.
Thanks. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was absolutely fantastic. I'm not sure when this edited version will drop, but we will let everyone know when it does. And we'll have all of the amazing resources that Kristi mentioned in the show notes for you all, as well as different ways to get involved. There's like a huge growing number of ways to get involved. So that's really exciting too. But I may need to do some rafting.
I see a raft in your future, Lauren.
So there you go. Let's all get on a raft.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you.
Thanks for watching, guys.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.
You've been listening to We Made This Political with Laura Forcum and Lauren Hall. You can find us on Substack, Instagram, or LinkedIn. The podcast Substack is We Made This Political. Laura's Substack is How to Human, and Lauren's Substack is The Radical Moderate's Guide to Life. Subscribe and share if you like what you hear, and please also rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. That really, really helps other people find our work and means a lot to us too. Thanks for listening.